Hi, this is DoNotCiv. I'm going to deal with some of the comments on my previous video, No Shortage of Crazy. Then I might deal with pantheism a little bit, and not sure where I'm going to go after that. Not sure what I'm going to title this video. But came down pretty hard on religious belief in the previous video. I'm sure I offended more than a few people. I got some predictable thumbs down. And I also took on the so-called para-religions or pseudo-religions, like the New Age religions, and I'm sure that irritated a few people. I think I annoyed some David Icke fans looking at the home pages of some of the people who left comments for me. I think, yeah, that's where a lot of that, those bristly comments came from. Anyway, I want to deal with a guy. His name is X Knowledge is Free X. And here's what he said. A delusion is a belief held with absolute conviction despite superior evidence. Unlike hallucinations, delusions are always pathological, the result of an illness or illness process. As a pathology, it is distinct from a belief based on false or incomplete information, dogma, poor memory, illusion, or other effects of perception. And he's pulling this from the Wikipedia definition of delusion. Now, wasn't entirely sure where he was. I kind of suspected where he was going with this, but then he left another comment. He said, people who believe in miracles, such as Jesus walking on water, aren't necessarily doing so with absolute conviction. And then I went, aha, now I get it. I see what you're trying to do. And he went on to say, despite superior evidence, since they believe in these events as singular, and thus there can be neither evidence for nor against it. That, to me, I read that sentence 3 or 4 times. It's incoherent to me. I can't understand what it is that you mean by that. Secondly, you have to distinguish whether the belief is a result of incomplete information, dogma, etc., or of real brain pathology, i.e. mental illness. And he's referring back to his first comment. Well, I got to admit, you know, yes, I understand the definition of delusion that you pulled from Wikipedia, but the way that the context and the way that you're applying it in this argument, I think, is both bogus and incoherent. I can't understand exactly what it is you're trying to do here. If I walk outside and I don't see a tree that is there, if I think it's not there and I walk into it, I'm gonna bump my head and perhaps knock myself out. If I pull up at a stop sign and I don't see the stop sign, or I pull up at a red light and think it's a green light, not because I'm colorblind, but because there's something wrong with my brain, and I charge out into the intersection and get in an accident, okay, maybe kill myself or kill somebody else. You really want to make a distinction in either of those cases between delusion and illusion? And what if you did? What are you saying? That somebody who doesn't have physical brain pathology but chooses to believe that I can feed 5,000 people with a fish and a loaf, you would put that person in the second category, who's suffering from incomplete information, dogma, illusion, as opposed to delusion. And what then? They get a pass? They get a pass? I assume what he's talking about here is, you recall I brought up the Diagnostic and Statistics Manual, and I said there were some mental health professionals that are working on getting the exemption for religious belief removed from the DSM. And I suppose what he's trying to do here is argue that the exemption should be left in, but the way he's doing it is just so weird, on the basis of making this distinction between delusion and illusion. I don't know, it just seems subtle, minor, and of very little consequence. If I cause harm to come to others or to myself as a result of illusion, your definition, poor memory, dogma, or incomplete information, how is that any different from the pathology of delusion? I'm sorry, I guess I'm just not, my brain is just not subtle enough to tease this apart. As hard as I try, and I did try, I'm just not getting what you're trying to get at with this. So you're saying that the person who believes that a deity died a physical death and was resurrected 3 days later and really firmly believes it with all their heart and is committed to that belief, that that person is not delusional, if I get you right, because they don't have a physical pathology. Well, then what do they have, man? What do they have? What is that? I guess that goes back to whether we have any control, true control over brain function or not. Can we dysfunction our own brains? Pretty sure the answer to that is yes, and so can other people. You look at parents, for example, religious fundamentalist parents, and the brainwashing that they put on their kids, or say an abusive parent, a neglectful and or abusive parent is going to cause harm to their child, and that can definitely cause brain dysfunction. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. Criminal psychiatrists and psychologists the world over will agree on that point. So, I'm just not sure, based on this argument, to try to tease apart brain pathology from simple hallucination or illusion, that necessarily gives people of religious faith a pass, or the people of pseudo-religious faith. Well, I don't know. No sale on that one. I tried to understand what you were saying, but I don't even think you have a firm grasp of what it is that you're trying to say. Because it just seems like what you're doing here, this is just some kind of like a semantic word salad, and this is some kind of semantic juggling act that you're performing here. I mean, this sentence in particular, since they believe in these events, you're talking about Jesus walking on water, since they believe in these events as singular, and thus, I don't get where the "and thus" comes from. I don't understand the importance of the event being singular either. They believe in these events as singular, and thus there can be neither evidence for nor against it. Well, aren't you arguing against yourself here? If there's no evidence for Jesus walking on water, and there's no physical evidence that any man before, during his time, or after has ever been able to do so, doesn't that imply that somebody who believes that is to use your excusatory language, illusional, if not delusional? It's just some people say the darndest things. Okay, I want to move on. And then there was another comment. A guy accused me, thinly veiled language, of being, he said, "Is this a parody?" Let me see if I can find his quote. He was wondering if my video was a parody, and it's like, no, I take this subject very seriously. I don't screw around with the topics like this. So no, it wasn't a parody. And this is the comment I think I'm going to riff on the most. He said, "This is a parody video, right? Batshit crazy is not evidence for or against." Well, granted, it's not. I think it's time for us to stop name-calling and do the right thing. Provide evidence for or against, or get off the soapbox. Please, big love to you. All right. And I responded, but I'll expand on my response. I said, providing an evidentiary-based argument to a schizophrenic or a delusional or somebody who's hallucinating I said, is like handing a crescent wrench to a squirrel. What would be the point? But I'll deal with every one of your issues here, one by one. All right. Time to stop the name calling. I was calling names, but I think society, and in particular the atheist community, has, if anything, been far too kind with crazy, delusional people for the last, I mean, we've put up with a lot for the last 2,000 years, right? People being burned at the stake, people being shown the instruments of torture for saying, talking about gravity and Earth revolves around the sun, and more people being burned at the stake and tortured, and we've gone through a lot of religious wars that are still going on. So if anything, I think we've been too kind and too patient, and maybe now is the time to start getting a little more aggressive, maybe a lot more aggressive with these people. And I'm not talking about taking away constitutionally protected religious freedoms. I will get into that subject in particular in about 10 minutes, but not now. Provide evidence or get off the soapbox. Well, on that last point, buddy, it's my channel, it's my soapbox, or if you watched a few of my videos, I don't stand on a soapbox. What I stand on most of the time is a half-empty oil drum and talk about peak oil. So it's my drum, and I will stand on it as long as I care to. So there. As for your other point, provide evidence for or against. Okay, I can do that. I don't think it's going to do a damn bit of good, but I can provide the evidence. Why won't it do any good? Well, because those evidentiary-based arguments have already been made in spades. In spades. How many arguments have been made for the science of evolution? How many? Right? Has that stopped people from promoting creationist science, for pushing for intelligent design to be taught in schools? No, nor will it. You can provide all the scientific data and evidentiary-based arguments from here to the moon. It ain't going to make any difference. It ain't going to change those people's mind. All right? So yeah, I resorted to name-calling because I know somebody who believes in crazy-ass shit, like high-frequency auroral research programs moving continents around and causing hurricanes, somebody who believes in that is not going to be swayed by anything that I have to say, scientifically based or otherwise. But, just to humor you, by the way, this guy's name is Michael Demonic, not demonic, demonic. Just to humor you, let's give it a shot. What the hell? Let's talk about HAARP, okay? You want evidence? Here's your evidence. Maxwell's equations governs or describes the laws of electromagnetic behavior and propagation of electromagnetic waves through space and various mediums. Typically taught sophomore level, maybe junior level, to electrical engineers, and as part of it's definitely part of a standard EE or physics curriculum. And it could be an elective course for other disciplines as well. So here you go. Here's your evidence. Maxwell's equations. Did I convince you? No. Why not? How come you're not convinced? Oh, you don't understand Maxwell's equations. Ah. Yeah, that's right. It takes about typically a semester of coursework and homework and study to get this under your belt. And before you do that, and you say, well, I can't afford to go to college, or I can't, that's too much of a time. I don't have that kind of time to spend learning. I get that. College is very expensive. It's a huge commitment of time and energy. And even then, you can't just walk into college and take an EM course. There's prerequisites. You need typically 1 or 2 semesters of calculus. And if you haven't had advanced algebra and trigonometry, you got to take that. You got to do the remedial education in those areas so that you can take the calculus. And you typically need at least 1 physics course, Physics 101, so you can get the basics of physics under your belt. So there's, you got to take 2-3 semesters of prerequisite courses before you can step into EM. Yeah, it takes time and energy. It's hard. This stuff is hard. And you say, well, that's, for whatever, either that's, I don't have the kind of time to devote to learning this. I mean, you could potentially teach it to yourself. A lot of people have. I don't have the time to learn this. I don't have the money to go to college and, pay the tuition to learn this. I understand that. College isn't for everyone. It's very expensive. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. But let me ask you this. Since you admit you don't understand the science of electromagnetism, you just admitted that, right? You don't have the time to educate yourself. You don't have the will to educate yourself on what these equations mean. Why then do you go running off to crackpots to tell you what's what? Why then do you go running off to people who have no scientific training, who are, for all intents and purposes, scientifically illiterate? Why do you trust their opinions over the people who do have the domain experience in this area? Why do you not trust the scientists and you trust crackpots like Alan Watt? Not Watts, the philosopher guy in the houseboat in Sausalito. Not him. Alan Watt, the conspiracy theorist, the guy Alex Jones has on his show all the time. Why do you trust him? Why do you trust a David Wilcock? Why do you go first, why do you gravitate to the batshit crazy crowd and ignore the science? Can you tell me that? Can you explain that to me? Because that I don't get. That I truly don't get. And an analogy of this argument can be applied in every case. You said you wanted evidence. Here's the fucking evidence. Did it change your mind? I doubt it. Nor do I think it would change the mind of anybody who slides away into pseudoscience. It's like picture a glass of water and you drop a drop of black poisonous ink into the water. Well, through the effects of dispersion, Brownian motion, that ink is going to distribute itself all throughout the glass of water. Think of your brain as the same way. When you let in the pseudoscience bullshit or the religious faith bullshit, it's like poison. It works its way through your entire mind, and you become, parts of your brain perhaps still work, parts of it don't. That's the danger of this. Am I being overly dramatic, melodramatic? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the effects of, again, going back to that other guy who's trying to make subtle distinctions between illusion or delusion. Okay, I'll humor him too. Say it's illusion. Say it's hallucination. Willful, hallucinatory illusion coupled with poor memory and dogma, I think were some of his terms. If you want to go there and forcefully dysfunction and disorder your mind by allowing pseudoscience in and irrational beliefs in, I believe that the effects of that are not fully known. They are not fully known. Perhaps this kind of irrationality gets walled off in certain higher level brain function areas, so it doesn't affect maybe the peripatetic nervous system. or the lower order brain functions that keep your heart beating and make your lungs breathe, control the lymph nodes and blood flow and all the other stuff. But who knows what the effects are on higher order mental function. And this leads me, now I said I was going to talk about how this dovetails with religious freedom. And this has a lot to do with why I have such strong words for this. Now, this sort of mental breakdown. Now, again, I'm going to go back to the GOP candidates because it's front and center right now in my consciousness. I'm very concerned about these religious demagogues, not so much Ron Paul, but definitely Gingrich, definitely Romney, and definitely Santorum. Religious demagogues all. And I'm very concerned. These guys walk around with their chest puffed out and talk about how much they trust and believe in the Lord. And to go back to that other comment where that guy said, you have to, what did he say? I don't want to misquote him here. His excuse, his allowance, was as follows. Firstly, people who believe in miracles such as Jesus walking on water aren't necessarily doing so with absolute conviction. That's his how he gives them a pass. Well, Romney and Gingrich and Santorum certainly profess to have absolute conviction. I've never heard them express any opinion or thought to the contrary, or that would lead me to believe otherwise. Have you? I certainly haven't heard it. And also, I don't have a doctorate from Harvard Divinity School in religion, but with my limited knowledge of Christianity, I am fairly certain that there are some essential aspects to the canon and to the pre-qualifiers to be of Christian faith. I believe the Immaculate Conception is one of them. Maybe the walking on water ain't, but I think the Immaculate Conception is one of them. But I am pretty goddamn sure that the death and resurrection is the cornerstone of the entire Christian foundation, and that without it, you have no Christianity. The entire New Testament collapses. Any Christian out there who wants to correct me on this, feel free to correct me. But I am pretty sure, as in almost 100%, that you have to believe, to be a Christian, you have to believe in the death and resurrection of Jesus. There's no way around that. No ifs, ands, or buts. Okay? So that destroys X knowledge is free X's first point. It's number A point about absolute conviction. People who don't have absolute conviction in that part of the dogma, that part of Christian doctrine, aren't Christians. Okay? They're simply not. They're something else, but they're not Christians. Okay, so that destroys that point. So now, back to the front-runner GOP candidates. It bothers me in the extreme that one of these three guys might land in the Oval Office. All right? Because that person will have their hand in proximity to the red button. And I don't want a Christian extremist. Another one. We had one. Reagan. I don't want another one. Remember Reagan with all his monthly or bi-monthly meetings with Reverend Jerry Falwell, and Falwell was egging him on about pushing the button, bring on revelation? I don't want another one of those fucking nut jobs in the White House. It distresses me, and it should distress you too. Okay? Do you know what the football is? The football is a suitcase that contains the launch codes for the nuclear missiles. It's typically carried, it can end all the hardware as well. Wherever the president goes, there's a Secret Service agent who follows him around, and you'll sometimes see this on the news. This guy's carrying that aluminum, hardened aluminum briefcase. That's the football, okay? I don't want any of these GOP religious lunatics with access to the nuclear codes. I don't want them anywhere near the football at all. Okay? Now, kind of got a little bit ahead of myself because what I should have prefaced this with before I got into this was that normally I don't care. I'm not about taking away your First Amendment rights to free speech and to worship how you please. Freedom of religion. I don't want to take that away as a constitutionally guaranteed freedom, with two exceptions. And I got a little bit ahead of myself and got into the one exception. The one exception is political power, political control. The one exception to that is when a candidate steps into the political arena, I'm not only entitled to scrutinize their religious beliefs, I'm obligated. And if you're a voter, you too are obligated. It's your civic duty to think about this. It's the most important job in the world. And it's absolutely your civic duty to think about this and to speak out. Okay? And to not be a pussy pacifist on this. You need to speak out. And if people want to attack you, deal with it. Deal with the flack. But don't ignore this issue. It's far too important. So that's the one exception I make. All right, is in cases, especially when it comes to the highest elected office in the land, I make an exception there. The other exception that I make is when it comes to groups that promote, advocate violence, or actively plan and carry out acts of violence. I make an exception for that. I do not think that if you are a 5 Points Calvinist ministry, you know what? I don't want to pick on denominations. Forget that. Forget I said that. In case you're wondering, what I was referring to is that movie Red State. Did you see Red State? I just kind of went there mentally, but that's okay. I don't want to pick on any religious denomination or sect, so I'll just generalize this. I do not accept that somebody standing behind the pulpit or at the pulpit should be able to preach or advocate killing of doctors and bombing of abortion clinics. I say that is not covered by the First Amendment. That is not constitutionally protected speech. And I say at that point, intervention is called for. And yes, the state needs to intervene. Okay? You do not have a right to do that any more than you have a right to yell fire in a crowded theater. That also is not protected speech under the Constitution. Okay? Neither should it be permitted for Muslims to teach violence in their madrasas, that's their schools, or to preach and advocate violence in their mosques. There's over 100 verses in the Quran that advocate, in fact, not advocate, call for, mandate violence and bloodshed. Over 100. And right now, it is legal to preach that in the mosque and teach it in the madrasas in every one of the 50 states and all U.S. territories. That is legally protected free speech. I don't think it should be. So, well, what are you going to do? Well, I think maybe in the case of whether it's Christians calling for bombing of abortion clinics or whether it's Muslims calling for killing the infidels and bombing the World Trade Center, that maybe this issue needs to be brought before the Solicitor General. That's the gateway to the Supreme Court. Maybe this needs to be adjudicated at the Supreme Court level, if it hasn't already been. And maybe the cases and all the precedents, the various precedents, need to be heard again. Because I'll tell you this, mark my words on this one, if there's another 9/11 in this country, people are just going to fucking lose it. I mean, you'll see left-wing pacifists calling for turning large parts of the Middle East into glassified parking lots and ashtrays, okay? You'll see en masse vigilantism in this country. We saw a little bit of it after 9/11, but fortunately it was suppressed. You know, Bush and company kind of got things under control. But I tell you, if it happens again, it will get ugly. It will get really, really, really ugly. So anyway, that's I'm obviously firmly committed to constitutionally protected freedoms. But those are the two exceptions that I make in terms of, well, religious speech from common citizens or be they political candidates. That, of course, is covered. But I'm saying I have a right and an obligation to speak out and to issue a warning if I think the warning is called for, and speak of the dangers, the extreme dangers of putting a religious zealot within range of the football. And I have just as much of an obligation to say that religious speech is not covered under the Constitution when it involves advocating, planning, or carrying out acts of violence. All right? So that's probably enough on that subject. Where am I up to? 32 minutes. Okay. I'm just seeing that, I don't want to remember something 30 seconds from now and have to double back. Yeah, so that's, those are some of my concerns, expanded upon a little bit more, that I talked about in the last video. All right, the next thing I want to talk about, I saw a video that Conference Report, aka Fred, recorded back in 2010 called Pantheism is Evil. And it had a lot of good points. Trying to reduce it down to its most salient aspects. It kind of what's that called? It kind of had a twist about a few minutes into the video. I thought Fred was going to be arguing for pantheism, and a few minutes in, there was this twist that I wasn't expecting, where he kind of called to task all the people who were intent on blissing out on the pantheistic world and how God is in everything, and or at least that there's this underlying intelligence insinuating everything. And he called bullshit on that. And if I'm mischaracterizing his position, I apologize, but I watched it just a couple hours ago. It's still pretty fresh in my mind. He kind of called bullshit on that, and he said that, in point of fact, and hell, I've made this argument, I know Gary's made this argument, a lot of people have made the argument, that life on this planet is basically just a slaughterhouse, a giant abattoir of animals eating other animals. Which, it's pretty hard to argue with that, but that was his main takeaway. In that video, anyways, I'm not saying that characterizes in its entirety his whole position, but in that video, he was just trying to disabuse people of this kind of soft pantheism, and was emphasizing the harder, pricklier aspects of life, and how life just it's basically like the Ouroboros. It's a snake eating its tail. It's a self-consuming, self-cannibalizing machine. And I see how, logically, the prima facie evidence supports that view of reality, that truth, if you will. But I have to be completely honest with you. And I know where to go with this. I'm pretty sure that the anti-natalists would agree with Fred's position. But, I have to be completely honest with you. I'm not an anti-natalist, A. And B, I'm more of what you might call either a neo-anti-humanist or a neo-humanist, if you want to categorize me and pigeonhole me. But B, I gotta do a mea culpa here. I'm really not as bothered by animal behavior or interactions, fauna on fauna or fauna on flora or flora on fauna. I've got a nice case of poison oak here. You ever have poison oak? It is the most bizarre shrubbery. I mean, it's really like something out of Aliens, what it does to your body, the way it just kind of like, it infects you, and then it percolates, it gets down under your skin, and if you scratch it, that only like moves the poison to other parts of your leg or arms, and it just kind of starts coming out in other places, and you get all these scaly strawberry rashes all over you. It's really bizarre, the kind of things nature creates, which made me think of, flora on fauna violence. But, that, I gotta mea culpa on this. It doesn't bother me as much. And maybe this shows the weakness in my moral and ethical framework, that I don't have a proper balancing of the scales, the value balancing of the scales of life. Maybe it reveals that, but I'm just being honest. Most of my distress when I look at the world comes from observing human behavior. That's where I think most of the problem is. And the anti-natalists say, sure, we can go along with that. I've never had an anti-natalist disagree with me on that point. But you're not, what they typically add on is, you're not going far enough. You're not, you're not attacking life down to the level of microbes and the DNA. You're not going far enough with the argument that life is inefficient, it's a waste engine, it creates needless suffering, and there's no prospect for it ending anytime soon. And it's unintelligent. It's unintelligent design. You're not piecing this all together and going where we go when we say, pull the lever, pull the circuit breaker and turn this thing off. Shut it down. We all go back to the pre-sentient state of cosmic bliss, where there was no consciousness, where there was no possibility of. I'm trying to remember that David Benatar expression. Life is sorry, I can't remember it. It's life has only negative possibilities. I'm butchering it. But something like that, that life has only negative potential or negative possibilities. Yeah, sorry. And therefore, it's better not to have existed. And I got to be honest, I just have not gone that far with it. There's days when I think that, or come close to it, but going back historically, several 100 million years, I realize that suffering on this planet has existed from the earliest parts of the Jurassic era, or even earlier, with dinosaurs munching other dinosaurs. There's been suffering on this planet for several 100 million years. I don't argue that. But what it seems to me is that mankind has been, what you might call an amplifier for this suffering, for this dysfunction on planet Earth. Mankind, you ever see Dune, the first one? The Dino De Laurentiis version of Dune? The, were those guys that fold space. The navigators. One of the navigators comes down and he's talking to the emperor, and he's very serious, and to emphasize how serious he says, deal with this problem or you'll spend the rest of your life in a pain amplifier. And they have very advanced machines, and you saw Paul Atreides, what happened to him when he put his hand in the Reverend Mother's box. So you can only imagine a pain amplifier would be worse than your worst nightmare. So getting back to my point, what I look upon Homo sap as is a pain amplifier for planet Earth. Yes, I realize that it would suck to be a springbok chased down by a cheetah. It would suck to be a zebra eaten by a lion, or a wildebeest eaten alive by a hyena. If you were one of those prey animals, that would suck. But, I'm not a wildebeest or zebra or a springbok, and I don't know what it's like to be one of them. I can force myself to empathize. I can imagine what it's like to be a fish and have a gaff plunged into your side. Probably doesn't feel very good. But, viscerally, it just doesn't have the same impact on me. Some things do, however. Factory farms. Those disgust me, truly. But again, see, here we're talking about a work of man. When I look upon the handiwork of man, most of it disgusts me. Factory farms being one example. That's not a natural condition found in nature. Animals stuffed into a barn, cheek to jowl, where they can't even move, and they develop sores and horrible cysts all over their body, and many of them die. They can't even be harvested, and they're ground up and fed back to the animals like some animal matrix. It's sickening. I mean, if there was ever an appropriate use for the word satanic, I think you could apply it to factory farms. If there was ever an appropriate metaphorical term, satanic applies there. And I tell you, I have relatives in the Midwest, and I've smelled these things. And you can smell them from miles away. And the people who live around these farms, they're sick all the time because of all the toxic effluent that's flowing out of them, and it's really horrid. I tell you, if you've ever smelt a factory farm, like a factory chicken farm or hog farm, that alone would be enough to convince you of its immorality and its evil, evil facilities these are. But anyway, I do have natural empathy in that regard, but in that scenario. But yeah, I guess I'm not sufficiently, I'm just not getting any closure on the argument by saying watching National Geographic, or have you ever seen, some of those Discovery Channel shows? Some of them are quite good, like Blue Planet, or what's the one narrated by Oprah Winfrey? I think it's called, is it Earth? There's Wild Pacific, Blue Planet, there's Earth, and they're all really good. And some of them feature graphic acts of animal-on-animal violence. I saw a gray whale ripped apart by killer whales, and yeah, it was a horrific scene. I feel a twinge of discomfort when I watch it, but again, to be honest, when I hear about a plane crash in Connecticut, and 250 people died, it really just doesn't affect me that much. Maybe it should, but yeah, I might feel a few moments of, like I said, discomfort and squeamishness, especially if they show the bodies, but truth be told, I probably feel more emotion and anger when somebody cuts me off on the freeway. I don't know, maybe you're completely different than I am, but on the other hand, when I look at the psychosis, the psychotic behavior of this species and how it's manifesting on planet Earth, like to, harp on nuclear technology for just a minute or two, that infuriates me. It makes me livid that this irresponsible pestilence of a corporation known as General Electric, which created those pressurized water reactors, the Mark I design reactors, that fucked up all of the Fukushima province and have now polluting all of the Pacific Ocean, that they will not take matters into their own hands, go to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and say, hey, we got to shut every one of these things down worldwide because they're all dangerous. Okay, and I'm quoting Arnie Gunderson on this. He goes, the pressure relief valves have failed every test, right? And there's so many deficiencies in these things, it's nightmarish. And we've got them in this country, we've got them all around the world, and the goddamn things should be shut down. And the fact that we don't, because certain companies, what? They want to make a profit? They want to protect their reputation? Right? You can't have capitalist organizations running nuclear power plants. It's that simple. That's proven. TEPCO has proven that. And I'm trying to remember the name of the company that has owns a lot of these reactors in the United States. These things need to be shut down, man, before there's another disaster. All right? And this is an example of human insanity that's just destroying the planet. And we don't learn. We don't. You can housebreak a dog, but apparently these little children, psychotic little psychopathic children running these corporations, cannot be potty trained. They cannot learn to put human interests above profit. These motherfuckers. And I guarantee you, there's going to be another disaster because these plants are aging, the welds are cracking, the pipes are old and corroded, and there's going to be another disaster. Count on it. Count on it. Unless something's done. All right? Psychotic how some of these corporations operate. Going down to Ecuador, all right? Throwing the native indigenous South American people, the Indians, off their land, who've lived there thousands of years, in peaceful harmony, in a symbiotic relationship with the environment, throwing them off their land. Say, hey, what are you doing out here in the jungle anyways? The fuck are you doing? We're going to cut your shit down, man. Put some steel pipes in the ground. Get at this oil. Screwballs, what are you out here doing? Taking ayahuasca, fishing, shooting some arrows. Get out of here. Let the big boys play. All right? When I see things like that, it makes me livid. It makes me insane. Because I don't know what to do about it. That's where I see the problem. Mankind, as a species, is a pain amplifier for the entire planet, for every species, including us. We make life hell for every species and ourselves. Okay? That's where I focus my attention. And I'm going to go off into conjecture here. I could be wrong, but I'm going to speculate that I think why many antinatalists have gone to that extreme position is they're so horrified by what they see that they went from one extreme of baby being pro-life, not in the Christian sense, but pro-nature, to just saying, fuck it, this is too horrible, turn the whole damn thing off. So they went from one extreme, seeing, as a lot of the Pollyanna, those eco-Pollyannas, seeing nature is joyous and wonderful and seeing nothing wrong in it. They went from that extreme all the way to the other extreme, that nature is defective down to the level of DNA, end it. That's my speculation. I could be wrong. I'm often wrong. But I think for some of those people that, you know, they probably went through that radical swinging, the pendulum swung way over one way, and now it's swinging way over the other way. Kind of like what we see with a lot of Occupy Wall Street folks, right? A lot of these people were probably brought up and spoon-fed the doctrine that America is great, we're a wonderful nation, we never do anything wrong, we're perfect. There's a big, giant sign right off the freeway on one of my commutes, previous commute. It said, "God bless America." This sign had to be like 60 feet wide or something. You know, so they were raised on this doctrine that America, the beautiful, God blesses America. And then they see things like a girl covered in burning napalm running out of a Vietnamese village, or the My Lai massacre, or the horrible birth defects that are cropping up all over Iraq, and in particular around Fallujah, due to the uranium dust that entered the environment from DU weapons. DU is depleted uranium, and they're seeing just horrific birth defects there now. I'll put a couple pictures on screen. Just turns your stomach. So they're seeing this, and not to mention the financial corruption on Wall Street, right? These criminal banker cartels, etc. And they're seeing all this, and now they're going, well, they went from thinking America's a great country. Some maybe never thought that, I don't know. And now the pendulum swung all the way to the other side. America's fucked. There's nothing good about America whatsoever. You know, get rid of America. I'm not speaking for all of OWS, but some of them probably think that. The more radical among them probably think that. And I've traveled the world, folks. I can tell you, America ain't the worst country on earth, okay? I have seen the public beheading squares in Saudi Arabia, right? Where on a once to twice a month basis, they make an announcement so you can come down and see the people getting their heads chopped off. Okay, I've seen those squares. America is not the worst country on earth. Okay, girls don't get stoned to death here for not wearing their abayas or burqas or being suspected of infidelity. Okay, there's country, plenty more than one country on earth where that happens. Okay, we're not the worst country on earth. Yeah, we've done some fucked up shit, definitely, but not everything we've done has been bad. You know, we spent a third of our entire oil reserves in World War II to defeat fascism and imperialist Japan. And if it hadn't been for that, we would have 1,000 years of the Third Reich. We would have had it. So often it's hard to have perspectives. People just want extremes, you know. And maybe I'll end with the New World Order, since that was one of the things I also took to task in the last video. You know, people see the world, they see how fucked up things are getting, and they want to find somebody that's responsible. They want to take comfort. It sounds strange to say take comfort, I know it does, but that's really what they're doing. They're taking comfort in this idea that there's a parental figure. As much as they claim to want freedom, they want somebody to point the finger at, right? They want the secret cabal underground lair of Dr. Evil somewhere, you know, outside of Antwerp, where the New World Order and the Bilderbergers and the globalists sit around a giant Dr. Strangelovian war room table and make decisions about how to run the planet. They want to believe in that because it's easier to believe in that It's easier to believe in that than it is to come to terms with the fact that nobody's in charge, for the most part. Nobody around the world knows what fucking buttons to push. Angela Merkel and Sarkozy don't know what buttons to push to save the EU. Obama doesn't know what buttons to push with regards to energy policy. They're flailing. They're flailing away. They're trying this and that. Obama now wants to, what's the latest thing I heard? He wants to grow giant algae ponds and make, I'm not joking, he wants to get, he wants to solve our energy problems through algae, you know, just, are there some evil cocksuckers in the world? Absolutely. No argument here, and sometimes they band together and do evil shit. Okay? That's why the word conspiracy is in the American Heritage Dictionary, because sometimes there are conspiracies. What I'm saying is that the world's not under the kind of control that you think it is. Most of this shit just happens because of poor planning, because people can't think properly, they're irrational, they have irrational beliefs and belief systems, they can't make good decisions, right? That's why, and of course, that all that piled on top, those are the smarter among us I'm talking about. The dumber among us are subject to all the base emotions, right? What are we? We're an ugly, tawdry, greedy, selfish, violent, mutated, pack-hunting primate. That's what humanity is, as I said in my last video. Okay? And the people without the higher order brain functions, they just gravitate to all the darker angels of our nature, right? All the base emotions. Right? A good portion of them will be drooling over the Academy Awards ceremonies on Sunday and thinking about upcoming, well, you know, whatever they do. Trips to the mall and the start of spring training for baseball season. You know, just whatever the masses do, you know, they're going to do what they do. And that's our lot, man. That's what we're stuck with. So back to going to the antinatalist position. I'm not ready to go there yet. I'll be sounding this message, this alarm, this warning, right up until the end, right up until I get that sound on my television. Boo! This is the emergency broadcast system. You know, right up until the red button is pushed, I'm going to be broadcasting this message. Perhaps it's futile effort. Perhaps it will lead to nothing, but, you know, that's the choice I've made. I would like to see some improvement in human behavior. I don't hold out much hope for it. I don't like words like hope in the first place, because it's surrendering to a future event that you can't control. And we do have control over this. The fact that you're listening to what I'm saying right now means I have some control over this, right? And you could talk to 2 other people and have some control over this. And you can vote and have some control over this. All right. So now you know what I think and why I think it, and kind of know what to expect in the future. I think I've said enough about this. Yeah, did I go into... I probably didn't go into pantheism. Well, I went into it enough. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to end here. It's almost 60 minutes, and that is enough for one video. So thank you for listening, and talk to you again soon. Bye.